After the capture of Charleston by the British in early May 1780, the Patriot cause in South Carolina was faltering. The British Southern strategy appeared well on its way to success. Savannah, Georgia had been captured 6 months earlier, and Patriot resistance in that state was now almost non-existent. In late May, Lieutenant Colonel Banastar Tarleton destroyed the last Continental force in South Carolina at the Battle of Waxhaw. The British were on the verge of controlling the southern colonies. The Continental Southern Army was non-existent, and defense of the Tree of Liberty in the South fell to local militia commanders such as Francis Marion, Thomas Sumter, Andrew Pickens, Elijah Clark, and William Davies. These partisan forces disrupted British communication and supply lines. Most important, they reduced the influence of local Tory militias and formed successful resistance against the British forces. Effective British control was also hampered by poor decisions of the High Command and skillful propaganda efforts by Patriot sympathizers. General Clinton, prior to his departure, issued a proclamation requiring all Patriots paroled after the surrender of Charleston to take an oath of allegiance to the Crown. The purpose was to restore royal government and end remaining resistance in the South by forcing Patriots to support the British cause. Instead of restoring order, had the opposite effect, angering Patriot sympathizers and sparking widespread armed insurrection against British authority. Both Andrew Pickens and Thomas Sumter became partisan leaders as a result of the high-handed practices of Tory and British troops inspired by Clinton's proclamation. Both men had their wives and families harassed and their homes and property burned. The Battle of the Waxhaw, whether a deliberate massacre or a poorly commanded battle, was effectively used by the Patriot propagandists in alarming backcountry neutrals against Tory forces. These events inspired many neutral settlers in the backcountry to join the American cause. I want to clarify some terms that will be used throughout this video. Individuals who supported independence were known as patriots. However, this was not a commonly used term during the Revolution. The most common term used was Whigs. The British and their American supporters also used the word rebels to describe patriots or Whigs. Individuals who supported the king were known as loyalists or Tories. While British arms were successful against continental armies, the partisan forces were having their own success against British troops, loyalist militias, and British provincials. To counter partisan success and influence in the backcountry, General Cornwallis, who had assumed command of the British forces in the South, established a series of forts at strategic locations. These posts were located in the Georgia backcountry at Augusta and the forward British supply base at Camden, South Carolina, and especially on the Charleston to 96 road in central South Carolina. The American Revolution in the southern backcountry was a bloody civil war between Whigs and Tories. Both sides resorted to burning of farms, businesses, homes, and churches, confiscation of property, slaves and livestock, and harassment and mistreatment of women and children. The story of Andrew Jackson being struck with a saber by a British officer is a well-known example of this behavior. The story of Martha Bratton is another example. When she heard that a British detachment was on its way to arrest her husband, she dispatched the family slave to warn him. Units of loyalist New York volunteers and Tory militia came to question her. When she would not reveal her husband's whereabouts, a Tory militiaman threatened to slit her throat with a reaping hook. Fortunately, a New York volunteer intervened and separated her from the attacker. When farm structures and homes were destroyed, the dependents, women and children, were not only left homeless, but also destitute, without food or clothing. General Greene later wrote, "The animosity between Whigs and Tories renders their situation truly deplorable. There is not a day passes but there are more or less who fall a sacrifice to this savage disposition. The Whigs seem determined to expatriate the Tories, and the Tories the Whigs. Some 1,000 have fallen in this way in this quarter, and the evil rages with more violence than ever. If a stop cannot be put to these massacres, the country will be depopulated more, as neither Whig nor Tory can live." Both parties practiced torture and summary execution of men, especially those who had changed sides or had committed atrocities on their opponents. All of these atrocious actions were conducted on a large scale. Two men epitomize the participants of the atrocities in this backcountry civil war: Lieutenant Colonel George Turnbull and Captain Christian Huck. Turnbull commanded the Loyalist camp at Rocky Mount, South Carolina, and directed a merciless campaign of destruction and terror against the Whigs and their families in northeast South Carolina. Captain Christian Huck, a Philadelphia attorney and loyalist, joined the British Army following its evacuation of the city. He was with the British Army in South Carolina, first as part of the British Legion, and then as an officer in Turnbull's command. Huck was not only merciless in his efforts to destroy Whig activity in northeast South Carolina, but blasphemous as well. He was called by the Whigs the swearing captain. Huck actively plundered farmsteads, terrorized women and children, looted and burned homes, businesses, and churches. He, not Tarleton, was more like Colonel Tavington, the villain in the movie The Patriot. Like Tavington, but unlike Tarleton, Huck was killed in battle. He was shot while fighting at Williams Plantation on July 20th, 1780, a battle also known as Huck's defeat. Such was the Patriots' hatred for him. While the British were successful in destroying the Continental armies at Charleston and the Waxhaws, the Whigs were defeating Loyalist forces in the backcountry. The Battle of Ramseur Mill, North Carolina, on June 20th, 1780, is an example of backcountry fighting. The combatants on both sides were untrained militia with no uniforms. Loyalists wore green sprigs in their hats, and the Whigs wore white pieces of paper or cloth in theirs. Despite being outnumbered, the Patriot militia of 400 men defeated the Loyalist forces of 1,300. More than half of the Patriots in the battle were killed or wounded. Loyalist casualties were about equal, but 50 men were captured. The battle was also an example of the Civil War nature of the backcountry fighting. The battle was fought between neighbors, personal friends, and even close relatives. Peter Coster, a Loyalist, was killed by his brother Thomas after the fight, who buried him. William Simpson was a Patriot scout. He rushed to the battle, desiring to kill his brother, but arrived after the fight was over. He never located his brother Reuben, who had suffered a serious but non-fatal injury, and had departed the battlefield earlier. Throughout the summer of 1780 and the early fall, Whig partisans managed several victories in the South Carolina swamps and backcountry at such places as Williams Plantation or Huck's Defeat, Hanging Rock, or Marion's successes at Blue Savannah and Great Savannah were significant in lowering Loyalist morale and weakening their support of the British. But these successes did not alter the strategic situation in the South. Following the British victory over the American Army at Camden and the remnants of the Continental Army withdrawing into North Carolina, Loyalist morale in South Carolina took a boost. Cornwallis, however, had one more large Patriot force to eliminate. The British general was aware that Thomas Sumter and his partisan force were operating in the Waxhaws area, while Cornwallis was destroying the Continental Army under Gates. Sumter was attacking British supply convoys. Sumter's force had captured prisoners and 80 supply wagons. Sumter was moving north toward Charlotte, North Carolina, with his prisoners and captured goods. After the Battle of Camden, Cornwallis ordered Banastar Tarleton with his British Legion to locate and destroy Sumter, the last organized, effective Patriot force in northern South Carolina. Sumter, in spite of learning of the disaster at Camden, did not push his column quickly. In fact, he rested his unit near Fishing Creek on August 17. That day, Tarleton, commanded about 350 men, left the main army and headed north, where he had heard that Sumter was in camp. Arriving late in the day, he learned that Sumter had moved further north and was on the other side of the Catawba River. To increase his speed, Tarleton picked 160 men, double-mounted them, and continued the pursuit, catching up with Sumter at Fishing Creek. Tarleton overwhelmed the sentries before they could raise an effective alarm. Forming up the cavalry, he charged into Sumter's unprepared camp, quickly gaining control of the stands of arms. Sumter, asleep under a wagon, without boots, half-dressed, swung upon an unsaddled horse and escaped during the ensuing attack. As a result of the battle, 150 Patriots were killed and about 300 captured. Tarleton won back everything Sumter had captured before, including 16 additional wagons, 2 cannons, and 800 horses. 250 British and Loyalist prisoners were also freed. Sumter arrived in Charlotte alone 2 days later. British success at Camden and Fishing Creek diverted attention from 2 Patriot victories. One at Musgrove Mill, South Carolina, on August 19th. This battle was significant in that an outnumbered force of Patriot militia defeated a force of Loyalist militia and regulars. The battle was fierce and long, but the frontier Patriot sharpshooters inflicted heavy casualties on the Loyalists, who were completely defeated. The following day, August the 20th, Colonel Francis Marion defeated a British detachment at Great Savannah, north of Charleston, and freed 180 Continentals who were captured at Camden. While these and other partisan victories hardened backcountry patriots following the British victories over Continental soldiers at Charleston, Waxhaws, and Camden, they were not enough to halt the British advance into the Carolinas. American resistance in the South was faltering, and a major victory was desperately needed to slow British gains. Thank you for watching this video. It is greatly appreciated. If you enjoy this content, please like, subscribe, and comment.